Okay. Okay, we're getting locked in and ready. Okay. Okay, maybe I can actually do that quickly. Okay. Okay. Let's get out of here. What's another interesting atmospheric piece of music? Okay, I need to. What was I doing this now? Hello. Hello there. This is Ben, the lecturer. Oh. I'll start another coin. Hello. Afternoon, everyone. I do have a camera. I've just set it up for the streaming thing, so it's not letting me do it for the call right now. But I am here. I am present. Welcome, guys. I'm really excited to get into today. Unfortunate that we couldn't do it on campus, even if it was online, just because I kind of like delivering lectures in front of a projector and everything. But that's all right. We can make it work for today. We're in my studio. How are we? How are we all feeling about this? Is this your first class for this semester, guys? Second. Very nice. Early days. So just before I get into the, because the way we're doing it today is that I'm going to give you guys a YouTube live link. I just think it's the one that works best. It's an unlisted video, and the chat from Teams is up on the stream as well, so you guys can see that. And there'll be like about a 10-second delay between when you send a message and when the message is seen by the system, kind of streaming system. But basically the way it's set up, today's a long lecture. Not every week is like this. It's just because there's a lot to get through for the first week. A lot of exciting and fun things, hopefully. So for example, next week we'll be kind of broken up and we're doing activities or things during the lecture as well, and then going back and having a bit more of a kind of look at some ideas and concepts and technicals. So show of kind of like a message in the meeting chat, like who has sound experience prior to today? Or who doesn't? Either a yay or nay, I suppose. Evelyn, not really. That's cool. Because this is a introductory course, and there's usually only one or two people who have sound experience previously. But it fluctuates from semester to semester to class, so it's just good to get a grip on it. Cool. Well, I'll get into the lecture. I'll get into the lecture soon, where I kind of explain why it's important, why it's interesting. But needless to say, this isn't an advanced course. It's certainly an introductory one where we can really just start to pull apart these relationships and start to really observe what's happening in sound. It's not just a technical course. It's actually a highly creative, artistic class that I teach. But that being said, of course, I'm providing you with the fundamental technicals that you require to kind of succeed. So another kind of showing the messages, just for next week, who is planning on coming in to campus, or who is able to? Angelique, fantastic. At least one person will be there. Anyone else? Cool. A few people. 3. Lachlan, you. Cool. Great. I'm really excited to get on campus. I was really keen to get in the class with people who could be there, just because, it's nice seeing people face to face. I kind of prefer it. But that being said, if you're not coming in to campus, I've worked very hard this semester to make sure the online component is really up to scratch, everything is clear as possible. And also, hopefully you'll see today, the streaming that I provide is a lot better than what I'd previously been offering. I'm using OBS, which is the Open Broadcasting System, just so it's really clear. And also there's a chance to kind of record parts of my lecture for myself and upload them at the end of the week as well, just for your revision. Before I get into the lecture, because I'll shoot the link in a second, and thanks, Lachlan. I'm keen to finally go back into. It's good to actually know there's a number of people coming in. That's really nice. So does anyone have any questions for me? Any kind of burning concerns? Any have had any issues with Canvas just before we get in? Does anyone have a decent internet connection for watching a stream? You have got it right. I'm not streaming video yet. I will be on YouTube in a moment. Just for some reason, Microsoft Teams doesn't like my camera. I've got my DSLR connected, and it's just being very moody and not recognizing it. However, my my streaming, and when it's on YouTube, you'll be able to see it. So, the idea being with this, before we get into the actual lecture, the way it's going to work is, just go into the general tab, or I'll create a week 1 tab actually just now, where I'll post the YouTube streaming link, and place your comments or questions for me during the lecture there. What was that? But yeah, and it's just the best way, kind of like, to kind of get questions through in a way I can see them, I can hear them. Obviously, we can already see it gets a bit chaotic with Teams, even if it's a majority of me just talking. This just removes that kind of interruption, but also allows you to kind of go, whoa, hold up, expand on this, or contribute if you find it useful, or you want to say something or kind of present an idea. That being said, that's probably enough of me yakking on. It's going to be a lot of me yakking off today. So I reckon I'll hang up the call now. I'll close the chat, and I'll post a YouTube link in the week 1 tab, which you'll see. So thanks, Ang Sheng. Yes, there will be a recording of one of the lectures from this week posted to Canvas at the end of the week. So don't stress if you're having internet issues. There will be a record that you can watch, and I've made sure of that there's a really solid way we can do that. But yeah, there's a few considerations I need to think about, especially with if we're having the chat up on screen. But I'll work that out when the time comes. All right. Any other questions? Where do we find the link? I'm just about to post it, Nazira. In the week 1 tab, you'll see. I'm just going to hang up now, and I'll do this right now. All right, see you in a second, guys. Well, I guess you'll see me in a second. All right, perfect. All right.
All right, so a lot of you, look at this. If you have a channel like me, so that will be youtube.com/C and then /Face World Media. Now, if I just add that /live again link, there's a reason why it's not arriving on the live link. That is, my current live stream broadcast is private. So you want to make sure that is public. How do you do that? Click on your person icon under your channel, go to the YouTube studio. Then go to videos on the left-hand side, and then click on live. You see that regular video uploads and live are actually different. Now, the first thing what you want to do is right here under upcoming. This is when you go live, and what you want to do is make sure that this visibility here is set to public, not private, not unlisted. So you're going to click on publish, and I wouldn't worry too much about the descriptions here. Face World Media goes live. I can just click on save so that, if people arrive on this link before I go live, they see something more generic as opposed to, my previous go live content. Now with that change, let's go back to this live link. And boom, you will see that this is the exact same live stream offline link as the other one that's more cryptic. But you can see that, hey, Face World goes live. Right now, the live stream is offline. And last time I streamed was on June 29th.
How the fuck do you find a... is this streaming? All right. All right. Okay. I think we can finally get started here. It is going to be a slight delay from... It'd be better if we talk here, actually. Anyway. Still working it out. I might just get rid of that window for now. I might just get rid of the chat window and we'll talk in YouTube just because I think that might be a bit more sensible. Right. Where are you? Sorry, guys. Just want to make sure I've got everything working properly before we begin in earnest. Can everyone see the video clearly? Just actually maybe type, if you have an account on YouTube, maybe type. I'm happy for you to also type in Teams. Right, here we go. Type. The sound is repeating. Is that the same for everyone? Are we having a bit of an issue with repeating? Okay. Let me have a look. I can't hear that. Okay. Can I turn off? The sound is repeating. Is that the same for everyone? Yes. Okay, I can see that. Are we having a bit of an issue with repeating? Okay. Let me have a look. I can't hear that. I can hear it now. Okay, I think I've noticed. The sound is repeating. Is that the same for everyone? Yes. Okay, I can see that. Yeah, I can see that. I can hear it now. Let's see. How can I get rid of that? Can I just? I can hear it now. Okay, I think. Is that better? All right, I'll give it a minute. Is that working for everyone? Yes. Okay, I can see that. Yeah, Yeah, I can see that. I can hear it now. Let's see. How can I get rid of that? Can I just? I can hear it now. Okay, I think. Is that better? All right, I'll give it a minute. Is that working for everyone? Is. Yeah, I can see that. I can hear it now. Let's see. It should. Is that better? All right, I'll give it a minute. Is that working for everyone? Is. All right. Yeah, I can see that. I can hear it now. Let's see. It should. Okay, I'm going to speak for a bit. Hello, hello, hello. Is anyone getting some repeating here? Is it still repeating? Are we okay now? Is it still repeating? Hope not. Think I've solved that issue. Okay, and then I might do. Okay, I'm going to speak for a bit. Hello, hello, okay, hello. Yes, is anyone getting some repeating here? Is it still repeating? Are we okay now? I think it is still. I don't know how this is happening. Okay, because I think it's a weird audio issue here. I think I've solved that issue. Okay. I don't even understand how this is happening. Sorry guys. Where is this? I'm going to speak for a bit. Hello, hello, hello. Repeating here. Is it still repeating? Are we okay now? I think it is still. I don't know how this is happening. Okay. So I only have. It's a weird audio issue here. Can you hear me now? Is there a delay? This is always the fun of being the first class off the rank. I've tried testing it with at least twice, but of course the time we go live is when it doesn't happen properly. Is it working now? Is it still repeating? Can you hear me? Is it working now? Okay, as I said, okay. Still. That's the problem with this kind of latency. Okay, you don't think it's repeating anymore. Cool. Hopefully we can actually get started now. Because this is definitely the part of the class where we're checking listening skills out. And I will now attempt to get started. All right. Point notes taken for... Yes, I think I worked out what was happening. I had a audio response thing that was just not working how I needed it to. Cool. Yes, because this is still... All right. No delay. Brilliant. Okay. We can finally get into it. I'm so sorry, guys. Let us do this. Okay, so welcome to Sound Design for Digital Media. After that really fun, yes, test of your ears, you know, obviously this is all part of my master plan to show you how to make you think about how sound works and how audibility works. Clearly, that's what I'm trying to do. So the first question we have to ask ourselves when working with this kind of medium is, what is sound? So the reason I bring this up is because with, you know, an image, a photograph, it's light, it's placed on a screen, there's a certain tangibility to it. But with sound, there's no way to kind of see it. There's no way to fully grasp it. We can grasp things that make sound, but we can't grasp things that are sound, because it, in essence, is transient. In essence, it is vibrations. And then from that, what is sound design? Also vibrations. Music, of course, has to be different, right? It has to be some fundamentally different thing than just the sound we hear in day-to-day life. You've probably caught on. It's still just vibrations. So what is the real difference between sound, design sound, and music? And this is the really key point here, where I now pause for effect. You know, there hasn't been enough pausing as of yet. Intention. That's the real key difference between music and sound. Now, of course, I'm not expecting anyone here to be wanting to make music or feeling like you have to learn how to make music. But what I want to highlight here is that the definition of those two things, of those two elements, sound and music, is actually fairly arbitrary. And they blur together constantly, and increasingly they are blurring together. There are lots of music pieces that I would call sound. There's lots of sound pieces that I would call music. It really is about the intention of the listener, one, and the intention of the practitioner, of the person making the sound. You're going to love this, guys. You're going to love this today. You're going to love me. Because we've just had a lot of fun with my voice repeating. And this is going into this thing about, this is obviously intentional. I'm going to present to you a really famous and important audio piece from Dinah Dush, Phantom Words and Other Curiosities. This is track number 21 to 25, and it's a series of tracks called Sometimes Behave So Strangely. Just a little background before I kind of get started. Dinah Dush is a professor of psychology at the University of California. And yes, she's really famous and well known for her work into the psychology of sound and music, and how our ears are often really easily deceived. And it's really fascinating. And so this one particular piece is very interesting. And I'm going to let her say it. It's about 5 or 6 minutes long. I'm just going to let you guys listen, because her explanation is really fantastic. The provocation is really interesting, and what happens is really interesting, because it is almost like magic.
This CD has featured a number of curiosities concerning speech and also concerning music. Now we examine the mysterious no man's land between the two and show how fragile the boundary between them can be. Composers throughout the ages have played with relationships between speech and music, either by composing music that has some of the qualities of speech or by embedding short segments of speech in musical contexts. In particular, the composer Mussorgsky has argued that speech and music are in essence so similar that with practice a composer could even reproduce a conversation in music. As he wrote, "Whatever speech I hear, no matter who is speaking, my brain immediately sets to working out a musical exposition for this speech." In our final demonstration, speech is made to be heard as sung, and this is achieved without transforming the words in any way or by adding any musical context, but simply by repeating a spoken phrase several times over. The demonstration is based on a sentence at the beginning of my CD, Musical Illusions and Paradoxes. When you listen to this sentence in the usual way, it appears to be spoken normally, as indeed it is. But when you play part of it over and over again, a curious thing happens. At some point, instead of appearing to be spoken, the words appear to be sung. Here it is.
The sounds as they appear to you are not only different from those that are really present, but they sometimes behave so strangely as to seem quite impossible. But they sometimes behave so strangely, they sometimes behave so strangely, 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 so strangely, so strangely, so strangely, so strangely.
You get what I mean by the delay thing now.
Now here's the sentence that you just heard. You might find that it begins by sounding like normal speech, just as before, but that when you come to the phrase that had been repeated, the words again appear to be sung.
The sounds as they appear to you are not only different from those that are really present, but they sometimes behave so strangely as to seem quite impossible.
So I leave you with a conundrum. Why should the simple repetition of a phrase, without any change at all, cause our perception to shift so dramatically from speech to song?
Right. So, that is now burrowed in your head forever. When I first went to art school, it was one of the first things they played to me for sound art. And everyone in that class, everyone has never forgotten, sometimes behave so strangely. That particular phrasing is now in there forever. Now, why I think this is so incredible, and yes, Naz, you said eerie. I think it's a really interesting word. Is no matter how long you look at a photograph, or how many times you look at a photograph, it will remain a photograph. It's not going to turn into a painting. But when we hear a sound repeated again and again, it transforms into music. There's a creative connection here that's really fundamentally baked in our brains, which I think is really interesting and allows us as practitioners of sound to really start playing with perception. And that's a big part of what sound designers do. We're playing with perception. We're toying with the psychology of people. And no matter what the medium or no matter what media, we're kind of functionally messing with people without them realizing. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But the main thing I want to say, the reason that we can do this is because with a photograph and you look at it in your hand, there's tactility of holding a sheet of cardboard with glossy print on it that tells us it's a photograph. And it's a visual confirmation that it's a photograph. We look at it and we know what it is. But sound is transient. You can't see it, you can't hold it, as my wonderful caption there says. And because it's transient, it becomes malleable. You can transform it in really interesting ways through the simple action of repetition, which is literally the most simple thing you can do with a sound. It becomes something else. And that's something else, I think. But let's have some fun. Even though we're not concentrating on music, I think what we can do here, because I know you haven't heard this phrase enough, I've made a couple different versions of this now. This first version featuring Coldplay.
Sometimes behave so strangely. 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 The sounds as they appear to you are not only different from those that are really present, but they sometimes behave so strangely as to seem quite impossible.
Right. So, why did I do that? It demonstrates something really interesting, is that once something becomes musical, it's very easy to push around. We can implicate it in all sorts of things, which I think is really interesting. And she now becomes part of this arrangement and having a duet in this kind of really generic kind of stadium rock piece. You can also do a different
The
type of
sounds
music
as they
well.
appear to you are not only different from those that are really present, but they sometimes behave so strangely as to seem quite impossible. Sometimes behave so strangely. 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 Sometimes behave so strangely.
Pink rubber camel sliders one day. My life is a movie, I'm never upset. Haters is upset because I make them, they get much less.
The sounds as they appear to you are not only different from those that are really present, but they sometimes behave so strangely as to seem quite impossible.
So you can now have Diane Dish, American academic in psychology, do a duet with, or a kind of like a collab with Lil Wayne and Nicki Minaj as well. Because of the nature of sound, it's so easy to combine these things and make them feel like they work together if rhythmically you can make them fit. Now, there is a delay. So while I was playing that piece, I got two questions here. And Jasmine, thank you. I'm glad you think it's great. I'm very pleased. So Julian, why does almost all pop music have a repetitive chorus? Well, this is exactly it. This is why pop music is so repetitive, because David Huron is a theorist I'm going to talk about later in the semester, discusses this idea of musical expectation. And musical expectation is a lot of how we get enjoyment from something. That predictability becomes a little glimmer of, dopamine in your head. Oh, I know where this is going. Because of that, repetitive pop music is inherently satisfying to a lot of listeners. I find it very boring a lot of the time, but a lot of people find a lot of interest. I mean, that being said, I also listen to house and techno, which is like beyond pop music repetitive. It's really about what flavor repetitiveness do you want, I suppose? Because as human beings, we really like patterns. Why do you think, floor tiles exist like they do? We love patterns, and it extends the sonic aspect of how we process things as well. It's not just arbitrary, that decision, or lazy. Often it's because it makes it more popular. People enjoy it more. That satisfaction in knowing what's about to come. Now, Naz, you asked, is that me singing? In the first one, yes, it is, terribly, with a terrible auto-tune on. I promise I can actually sing better. But I was just putting it together for this class, and it's like, you know what? It's actually better if it sounds worse. It kind of fits more into that terrible new age Coldplay aesthetic, I think. That being said, I love T-Pain and his auto-tune usage, which I won't go into because I can talk about it for half an hour. It's very interesting. But the reason I bring this up now is to provoke you guys to start thinking about the possibilities of what sound can do. The Avalanches, that fantastic Aussie Plunderphonics group, have built a career on taking non-musical sounds and making them musical through repetition. That Frontier Psychiatrist, listen to that now, having listened to Diane Dush, and you'll see how these ideas are related. This piece, her paper was released in, and this album, I should say, was released in 2001. Plunderphonics, I think, and Avalanches were released like 2009-ish, I think. There's a real relation there. I think that's really interesting about the repetition of a spoken word and it being music. They're highly related. Okay, so I realize I'm out of focus. I just noticed now, so have fun with that. But you can still see me gesticulating, basically, which is all that really matters to me. What I want to kind of move on to now is, and you can see how easily I can get sidetracked talking about this kind of stuff. And hopefully this is interesting because I find it really fascinating. But the next point I want to make is you don't have to use musical sound to change meaning. I think when we think about kind of changing the meaning of a moment emotionally, we often think about, oh, you put a sad piece of music or a happy piece of music. But the real trick of sound design is that you can change meaning without that. If you're just thinking about how to express a sonic idea, or how you even say a word, and the sounds that surround it, that can be incredibly evocative too. So, I've got an example here. One, it's the same phrase repeated twice. I've recorded it twice, and I've changed the effects of the performance of the same words that mean exactly the same thing literally. And I've changed the the surrounding sounds, the other sounds you hear in the background. And I want you guys to really think about how different it reads. And does it? I mean, am I wrong? Does it read exactly the same way? You tell me. Even though there's a 30-second delay, you tell me.
A young girl goes into the woods, following an old brick path to a small shack covered with vines.
So track one, same phrase, second time, different sonic techniques.
A young girl goes into the woods, following an old brick path to a small shack covered with vines.
I'm going to give it a moment. It will be a delay because I want to get you guys' responses. Type in how you think that's changed and why you think it's changed in the YouTube or in the Microsoft Teams chat. I've got both up here. So tell me what is reading different. Actually, I'll play them again during the delay.
A young girl goes into the woods, following an old brick path to a small shack covered with vines.
A young girl goes into the woods, following an old brick path to a small shack covered with vines.
So, really listening to those kind of changes. What are they? So, fan, I just got the comment. This is how long delay is. I just got that. The sound sounds like a monster. Yes. So, fundamentally, there's a really big difference between those two voices. So, there's the voice sing. First one, I actually pitched up my voice after recording. There we go. I do what I want. The first one sounds lighthearted and like a fairy tale narrator. The other is horror-y. Angelique, the first one is introduction to kids video game. The latter is for the Witcher. That's great. I love that that idea. And then just in the first one, it's almost comical. The second one's more ominous. So these are really great observations. Let me dissect these now. So, the monster kind of type sound, I actually took some pig snarling in the second one, the scary one, and I actually slowed it down to make it sound like a demon, which is every demon sound effect in any media you watch, video game, film, radio, or podcast or whatever. It's actually just a pig snorting very happily in his pigsty that's been slowed down. That's a demon sound. So that's why that sounds like a monster. But I didn't just do that. I also took my own... This is me in both these recordings. What I did with the first one is I spoke it normally. A young girl goes into the woods. And then I pitched myself up. So I sounded a bit more like a pixie. It sounded a bit more kid-like. The second one, I pitched myself down. I performed it more slowly and with more grit on the voice. A sonic effect that I'm doing with my own voice here. I'm kind of distorting my own voice. And then taking it to the next level by pitching it down. Now, when something is higher and it sounds like that, we read it as smaller. When we hear something deeper like that, we read it as bigger. And that's just because generally that's how sound works. Big things have a deeper sound because the resonance is bigger, the way it works. And I don't want to go into that right now because I'll talk about that later, about how frequencies work. But yes, generally we kind of associate scale with that. So yeah, the introduction to a kid's video game, certainly I think, I was trying to channel like things like Banjo-Kazooie from back in the day, but those Disney kind of read-along storybooks kind of things. And I think that kind of covers that. I think the barn animals, Naz had a great point there about the barn animals. Yes. So I had the kind of forest sounds in the background for the first one. It wasn't reading kind of safe enough for me because a forest is generally pretty neutral as a sound. But the sound of a cow mooing and a chicken kind of clucking puts us in a residential or a farming area where there are other people around. We're not hearing people, but we're hearing farm animals. So it must be people present. So again, that's another thing I did to kind of really hit home that was safe. That's then subverted and changed in the second reading. And so without music, I've been able to completely change the meaning of that phrase, or at least the emotional read of that phrase. It went from a place of safety, a place of, kids' video games, children's narrators, to a space where we're much more unsure. And in fact, we're a bit worried for this young girl going to the small shack. What is in the small shack? Well, we don't know. We don't know in the first one either, but we assume it's her grandmother or something, right? Moving on. Sound design is not just in media like audio, recordings, film, video games. It's actually everywhere. In any product design, there is, if it's big enough, if they're paying enough money, because they want it to be good enough. And even in cheaper ones, they're considering it, but they don't have a dedicated sound designer. There is someone thinking about the sound. There is someone designing the sonic experience of it. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I think the best example I can show is this video from the Mercedes-Benz channel.
These interior sounds are very important. You come into contact with them before you've even driven the car, and you've already at least subconsciously made up your mind if you like them. It's especially important as vehicles have become quieter, so noises come to the fore which maybe could only have been heard in the interior. Using our artificial heads, we can record sounds and analyze them later. Then, for example, we're able to listen to the sounds once again in our acoustic lab and examine whether they fit. You hear the sounds as if you were sitting in the vehicle. The test subjects judge whether the sound is pleasant or unpleasant to them and if it fits in a Mercedes. We also ask about the different attributes. Does it sound powerful? Does it fit to the component? Does a seat adjustment sound like a seat adjustment and such like? The blinker has always been a relay, and it has this sound. In the meantime, technology has improved, and we can also generate this sound synthetically. But we still want it to sound like a relay. This is a familiar and high-quality sound.
Before moving on, I want to talk about how freaky that is. And actually implications for electric cars as well. So he's speaking about that sound when the blinker goes on, that click that you hear. It used to be a relay, which means actually a physical motorized object that would switch the light on and off. And that's where that sound comes from. But now, every modern car now, that's no longer how it's done, because it's now controlled by computer, and the less moving parts in any kind of industrial object, the better, because there's less things that will wear out. So those things no longer exist in modern production cars. Yet every car that you drive in still has this sound that sounds like the acoustic relay, that sounds like it's actually real and being produced in real time in the car. But it's actually an audio recording of this outdated technology, because otherwise, and this is what this guy's saying, otherwise it doesn't feel like the blinker's on. We have an association. And at this point, it's been like 20 years since they've kind of had those real clicky switches in cars. Yet we're still using these sounds because as a culture, collectively, it's how we understand these things work. And to subvert that would be very strange and actually work against what it's trying to do. It's actually unsafe, in fact, because you're expecting that sound. If you're not hearing it, you don't know when the blinker's on, even if it's a different sound. Because really, it could be any sound. But it has to be that sound. And not only that, for this particular company, it has to be high quality. Let me continue the video.
Here on the component test bench, we have the possibility to test individual components in the vehicle at an early stage. Even when there is no vehicle, we can already analyze how the sounds would be later when they come into the vehicle. Quality is very important, and the sounds give an indication of the quality of the item.
Quality is very important, and sound gives an indication of the quality. So he's talking about the materials with which an object is made. When we kind of pick it up and use it and feel it, it makes sound. And often when something's more expensive, it's heavier, it's made out of better metal, better plastics. It sounds and feels better. That experience feels better. And in the case of Mercedes and a lot of other car manufacturers, I know Tesla does the same thing, and I'll talk about that in a second, actually, Tesla cars. That's very intentional. It's also I guarantee Apple products, the way you open them from the box when you buy them new or from the factory, that box, the way it kind of goes when it opens, it has a little bit of suction of air. That's designed to do that because then it feels luxurious and expensive, even though it's just cardboard. It's adding to that experience and that sense of value. And with Apple products, especially, I use Apple, they're incredibly overpriced a lot of the time. And that feeling of luxury through the sound design of the box opening is really important. I'll leave that video for now. It's a really fascinating, they just continue on the same kind of vein. But there's a really kind of different way that design is used. To talk about the Tesla thing I was mentioning, electric motors don't make any sound, or they make very little sound because they're not actually creating little explosions that create the propulsion engine for a vehicle to move forward. It's actually just literally a little electric motor amped up to 10. And they produce very little sound relative to real cars. And that, much like the relay sound of the blinker, if you're not hearing that, it's actually dangerous. People forget that they're driving and they don't feel like they're driving. They feel like they're floating is the descriptor word. And so what Tesla Motors have now done is have a sound maker within the car that makes that kind of drone that we associate with the car is driving, playing every time you drive in the car. Because without it, the experience feels incomplete and it doesn't feel like you're doing the thing you're currently doing. This is real. You are driving. It just doesn't feel like it because it doesn't sound like it. And that sense of feel is really important. Just to show another example.
My name is Michael Jones. I'm senior partner at Foster & Partners, which is the architectural studio of Norman Foster, and we're based in London. People have a sense of how buildings sound. And, at the end of the day, an architect's job is about dealing with people's senses. We live in an environment where the light changes constantly and the sound changes constantly, and we get a constant change of temperature, and that's what we enjoy. That's what we were made for. And so I think it's really important, particularly for sound, to start working right from the beginning on any project to make sure that you create an environment that's the best it can possibly be for whatever task it's being created for.
So there we have it. That's a really prime example of, in architecture, even the way sound is distributed is really important. Now, much like with the Tesla motor, there's a really interesting kind of story about the sound design within an office space. There's a new thing called passive cooling, which is much better for the environment because rather than having air conditioning running, you actually have a massive cavity underneath the building where air is circulated just with fans rather than pumped through a heat pump because underground it's cooler. But what actually happened was in these new office spaces they were building, people felt tremendously uncomfortable and would whisper all the time. They would whisper because the sound of air conditioning, that drone again, that white noise you call it, allowed the space to feel a bit less echoey, a bit less drafty, and a bit more private when you're having a conversation with someone else in the office. Because without that white noise, that drone of the air conditioner, the space reverberated, it opened up, it felt very exposed. And there's that word again, feeling. And so what they had to do was install speakers all over the space that played white noise every time the office was open, because it felt very uncomfortable for people working there because it was too quiet. We expected that sound in that space, and it actually was detrimental to have it quieter. Which goes against what you would initially think. Surely offices where people are doing work, you want it to be quiet as possible. Not so. So this is all to the point that sound design often works, the term is under the radar, undetected. Sound design is not meant to consciously register. And because of this intention, where we're not kind of trying to draw attention to what we're doing, We have the power to move people and change people's perceptions in what we'd call subversive ways. So, in ways that they're not expecting. And here we go. There's actually the slide with it written. We don't notice it, we feel it. Sound can assault. Transformers, 2007. Sound designed by Eric Adal, directed by Michael Bay. Bing, bang, zoom. Massive, visceral film, meant to feel aggressive, exciting. And that's in a massive part due to the sound. I'm sorry, I'm seeing myself convulsing to the visuals just before. Why did anyone stop me doing that? So it's assaulting you. It's affecting you in a really visceral and aggressive way, which hopefully is really exciting and feels like a roller coaster. Sound can inspire as well.
So hold me in your long arms. So hold me now in your long arms. In your automatic arms.
So there we have it. This is Oh Superman from Big Science 1987 by Laurie Anderson. I find this an incredibly moving piece of music. It's actually 8 minutes long. And I think it's also interesting to show, because we just discussed that idea of repetition making it musical, making sound musical. We have that O phrase rhythmically repeated. It becomes a kind of rhythmic backing or percussion for this song, which I think is really interesting. I think it's a really beautiful song. It's really worth a listen to the whole thing. And sound can make us feel like we're happy. So, Tinder app notifications. Don't know if anyone uses Tinder, but they changed. When they launched in 2012, they didn't have any sounds. I just used the stock effects from the iOS library. And then in 2016, they hired a company called Listen, a sonic branding agency, which basically just means they write jingles and like little kind of sounds for apps and stuff and for logos. They created this sound. Why would they do that? Well, my theory, and this article from Fast Company in 2016 doesn't mention it by word. The Tinder app socially is a pretty brutal thing. It's the most shallow way you can judge someone. Photographs, a short bio, and you consider them worth your time or not in a deeply emotional way. It's pretty brutal. And so it's really fundamental, so it doesn't feel like brutal to the people rejecting and people being rejected, that the sense of the app is happy, light, joyous. And I think certainly the sounds for Tinder are working very hard to do that. They're working very hard to make it feel like you're having a great time, even if you're being rejected by everyone or you're rejecting everyone. Because I think there's a certain aspect to these kind of apps which is fairly fairly brutal and fairly, unkind. Socially is what I mean, as a wider social view. So it has to sound as happy as possible because it's not bad. So And now I just want to talk through what I do and who I am and why I'm teaching this course. I've been working in music and sound design for 9 years, just about, probably more now. Developed sound in school, film, television, dance, theatre, games, apps, podcasts, everything in between. I'm a composer. It's the main thing I do, kind of for money, is or academic as well. I write music for films and theatre, and for cartoons that you'll see in a moment as well. I write songs. I'm a songwriter. It's just something I do for a hobby more than anything. I'm a producer. I help people with podcasts, producing podcasts, but also music. And I'm a sound designer, especially for theatre mainly. I work in those spaces live, making an experience that feels visceral, exciting, and emotionally engaging. Not always using music. I'm a film sound honours student, so hopefully, this year I'll complete my honours, and I plan to complete a PhD. I think 2025. Before 2024 would be kind of insane because that means I'll be completing it in 2 years. But yes, I hope to do that in 2025 in sound studies, and also especially the emotional relationship between films and music and how that's changing really fundamentally. It's becoming much more complex than it used to be. I won't go into that now because I could bore you all for ages and it wouldn't be very relevant to what we're talking about today. I will discuss it eventually though. To kind of like help you get a sense of the things I do, I've actually put together a short little 5-minute sizzle reel, basically showing what I do and a couple of the projects I've worked on. So enjoy. So this piece I wrote myself. I had production assistance from Shizuku Thief. In the context of the film, the rest of the soundtrack is really aggressive and brutal. And this is the one childlike, happy moment of the film. This was a film noir, so a kind of detective black and white film I worked on. So working with jazz kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Then there's a really fun dream sequence where I got to go really wild with the music and do what I would consider kind of fairly experimental, improvisational stuff.
Where are you, Frank?
Vera.
Nothing is but what is now.
What game is this? Sinking like a stone.
Complete change of tone here. This is an animation I've worked on.
Greetings, traveler.
Oh, hey, money person.
Welcome to my store, fair knight. May I interest you in any mystical wares from afar? I can offer countless treasures and your heart's desire in exchange for simple tokens of gold and silver.
Ha ha! Cower before my villainy, worms, for these delicious cakes will all soon be inside my tummy.
Having the action here.
If only there was someone who could do something!
Slowing down, getting more pathetic.
Ha! C'est la vie!
Don't steal. Give that back.
Yes, ma'am.
Go home and think about what you've done.
Very cartooning mapping of the So that was my work with Finnegan and Smith, which is kind of like a burlesque queer performance company where I have done a lot of composition for them. In 2019, I travelled to Prague for the International Biennale with them to kind of provide the sonic backing for a kind of experimental sound and kind of performance piece. And this happened directly afterwards, which was a kind of a performance in Berlin of The Rapture, which is a thing I wrote a number of works for. This is just a piano piece I wrote for Expressions Dance Company for this in 2015, I think. For this piece called Seven Deadly Sins. Very interesting working collaboratively, compositionally with dancers, because you write a piece, they respond to it, or they do some choreography and you respond to it. So they do it without music. And then there's a conversation that happens, a lot of back and forth, which is very different than the way I tend to work with film, especially, which is very much everything's finished and you're coming in to fix all the problems. And finally, this is just a kind of atmospheric piece I wrote for a play called Wild Cherries, where it's meant to kind of feel isolated, but not completely hopeless. And so there's a kind of like interesting balance that had to be struck between non-melodic, non-happy, but also not too brutal. So that's the kind of work I do. That's the kind of the musical work that I do. So now you kind of understand the perspective I'm coming from. Hopefully that kind of helps clarify that. So this course, we're now getting back onto what this course is. This course will teach you why you should be paying attention to sound, what the mechanics of the sound you're hearing are, and how to execute practical and effective sounds. That's really beginners, like technical stuff, and how to speak and write on your sound, how to build an argument for why that is the correct sound choice. All these skills are really useful, even if your main medium isn't sound. I think it's a really exciting kind of skill to have. And I'm really tremendously excited about working with you all this semester. I really enjoy teaching this class. I think it's a really interesting one. And I've tried as hard as possible to ensure that the work that we do together will be very interesting and enjoyable, no matter what kind of perspective and background you're coming from is. So on that, the 4 parts, how this course is structured. So part 1, sound basics. So this is just really the fundamentals of how to record sound and what sound is, and really kind of understanding our tools, the digital and kind of, electronic tools that we use to capture and edit sound. And it's really important that we understand that so we can be creative. We can't jump into kind of doing massive kind of, half-hour films or whatever, sound or pieces of music or sound art without understanding these tools. So this is a really interesting and important step where we kind of get the really, ground level. We're all on the same level here of understanding about the kind of like encoding of sound, digitization, and the workflow and the kind of signal flow of how sound works. That being said, there's no reason we can't push ourselves conceptually here as well, really in really interesting directions. Part 2 is talking about virtual materiality. And this covers a whole lot of different things, but suffice to say, digital environments, I think, clearly, right? Trying to stream on YouTube, what fun. Digital environments becoming increasingly important in our day-to-day lives. We look at sounds that often appear in these places and highlight the interactive sound user. So we look at, of course, VR, video games, but applications, websites, and how they engage with sound as well, because they all do one way or the other. And I think it's really important, like with Tinder, I think it's a really good highlight of a digital environment that's using sound to change how we feel about it. It's really important to understand how we're being pushed around by sound in these kind of places, because it's too easy to be passive, I think. So we look at that. And it's also worth mentioning that there's an assessment with each of these sections. So I'll talk about the first assessment in a moment, but in this part 2, you're going to be making a number of sounds for a application, like with Tinder, the same kind of thing, but for a cooking app. Part 3, syncresis and misattribution. I don't expect you to know those words yet. Don't worry if you don't know those words. But these are kind of concepts that are really fundamental to how we kind of design movement and sound together. We look at the theatrical backgrounds, but also how to practically kind of obviously implement them into our projects. But yeah, it's really just about kind of like an understanding of how these kind of concepts play in our moment-to-moment kind of work. And part 4, resonant storytelling. So basically what this part really is about, we've been kind of talking about small instances of sound. This is about like, well, how can emotion and sound work over time? How can it shift? How can it build? So to that end, we do a 2-minute film. And so I'm giving you the animations or the kind of visuals to do that. And you have to design it and either follow or impart the emotion onto the scene. It's a really fun one. It's a really nice way to end a semester, and it kind of encapsulates everything we've been learning in a nice little package. That being said, really key here that we're not getting trapped into thinking that this is just about film sound. It's about all types of sound, and including even this one. But it's just a really nice way to work with sound in a classroom environment is with film, because it's easy to share with one another, and there are lots of kind of everyone has a fundamental understanding of how film works. So that means we'll have more of a ability to discuss it with each other. Because class discussions are really, really essential as well. This first lecture is very much me talking a lot. The next section, the next class, especially next week, will be much more conversational. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But I'm going to actually wait for like 30 seconds for the stream to catch up. And I'm going to ask this question. I'm going to ask you, do you have any questions about any of this? Is anyone freaking out? Is anyone kind of thinks it's, or are people feeling good about it? Do you want me to go in any more depth or clarify anything about anything before I move forward? So I'm now just going to wait a moment, have myself a glass of water, a bit of my coffee in my thermos, and you guys can type your answers as you see the stream. It's a bit weird working with this delay, I've got to say, but that's all right. You get to watch me drink water. I tell you, man, gesturing with your hands and talking really makes you thirsty. A bit of sound design for you guys. And please type no if you don't have any questions, because I need to know that you guys have at least seen that question and have thought about responding. Okay. Actually, I'll use this opportunity. Jacinda, do what I want. I'm really glad you're excited to get into this area. That's really wonderful. Jacinda Gomez used Yanni versus Laurel. This was the question I said I was going to discuss. This is probably going to be really Interesting. So the Yanni versus Laurel, I'll post it in the YouTube thing afterwards, or in Teams afterwards, or actually just if you want to post that into the into Teams. It's an audio recording where it's a bit of an illusion where you can hear either the name Yanni or Laurel, and the reason why both can be heard, and it's actually not arbitrary who hears what word. Laurel has less high frequencies, or is it Laurel? Yanni, yeah, it has less high frequencies. It's more bassy the way it's pronounced, and Yanni is higher in the register. So this really weird distorted recording because of the nature of it. If you're older and you've lost some of your high-end hearing, which was what happens when you as you get older, and is actually exacerbated by going to really loud concerts or movies without earplugs. Not movies. They should usually be within safe levels, but clubbing. I know my partner, she goes clubbing all the time without earplugs. I just bought her a pair. It's like, please, I want you to be here. I want you to be able to hear me by the time you're 40. So it's really suffice to say that you lose your high end hearing. So therefore, the phrase Yanni is going to be less clear because your hearing is more muddied. The ears aren't as healthy, so they hear Laurel. Whereas people like us who are a bit younger, well, not like us. I'm sorry, that's a massive assumption on my part, assuming we're all in our 20s. But the people who are younger, I mean, I'm 25, so I'm a little baby. Like me, I hear Yanni more easily, but I can hear both. It depends what kind of how you're approaching it. Right, I've got some questions now. Fantastic. So thanks you, I'm really pleased that you're excited. Naz, will this lesson be recorded and on Canvas? Maybe not this one. I am recording it right now, but I'll see how the other lectures go. I mean, if we could do without the half hour of faffing about trying to work out the sound, I mean, I could edit that out. But maybe the Friday one might be a goer as well. I think I'll pick the best or most kind of well delivered lecture from the week, because it of course changes week to week. The one that kind of like will be make the most sense to watch after the fact, I think will be really key. And I'll talk about Canvas in a second, and about the expectations about attendance. We're now entering the admin zone. This is where I have to discuss all the technical aspects of this course. So, semester synopsis. So, this is available on Canvas on the kind of I think it's called the syllabus page, and you can see the headline and the sub-headline of like what I'm talking about each week. So I've talked about this course being in 4 sections. So part 1 is weeks 1 to 3. Part 2 is 4 to 6, and you notice in week 6 we have a work in progress. What that actually is half the class, which I'll select at random once I have you guys in a neat little list, will present what they have at that point in time for that project. It's not expected to be finished. It's not expected to be a presentation. It's expected to be like a sentence and a question to the class, a provocation, where we can start to engage with each other, discussing these sounds and where what is really interesting about the sound, where can we improve. And it is marked in your grade whether you did it or not. It doesn't affect it percentage-wise, but it is noted whether you participated or not. So I highly suggest you attend that. I'm glad you think it's really interesting, Lachlan. I thought that before, so I just thought I would mention. And then, again, we have a second work in progress, where the second half of the class you didn't present the first time will show their work. So everyone has an opportunity for this kind of this kind of work in progress presenting, because it's really essential as a practitioner, no matter what field you're working in, that you're able to show work that isn't finished and discuss it. It's like half my job is doing that. I know half my partner is a graphic designer. It's like 90% of her job is showing work that isn't finished and talking about it and justifying the choices as she's going along. And yeah, so part 3 lectures, week 7 to 9, part 4 lectures, week 9 to 12. In week 11, analyzing sonic media, robbing the oldies. So just sort of talking about people who came before us. That is a small assessment that's only in class. It's not more homework, but it is assessed. It's worth like 7% of your overall grade, not much. And basically what we do is we come in, I present some readings that we've already looked at and a new reading. We watch some films. We have a group discussion about the films. And then you submit a 200-word written at the end of the class, summarizing an idea that you found interesting from the class, referring to a text. Just really important to highlight now that it is assessed and it's near the end of semester. But it's not, don't feel stressed about it. Just be aware of it, because I'm not expecting any kind of preparation beforehand. It really is, because I understand end of semester. I mean, I've done uni. I know what the end of semester is like. But it's, I think just an in-class thing that doesn't bleed out into anything else is a really kind of great way to kind of like ramp up to the end of semester. And then final words, discussion of the sonic medium. Again, it's an in-class task. It's not assessed in week 12, but you're given the opportunity to have a one-on-one conversation with me about your project if you're having an emergency or you've run into a problem. And also, you're discussing with each other the project. So it's not as formal as the works in progress are, given they're just a sentence and a question. It's much more collaborative in a sense, and this is going to be online and offline, of course, as well. But it's about kind of like showing where you're at the moment before that final push, before finishing your piece. Any questions about that? I'll give it another minute. I think it's worth kind of like seeing if you guys have any kind of questions about that. If not, just type, all good. But I just want to make sure that everyone's on the same page with that, and that's all making sense. Because I think it's really good and important that we kind of are all on the same page on the semester kind of layout. Cool. All good. Perfect. Brilliant. Thank you. That really helps if you type all good, just because it means I know that everyone's like on the same page. Right. So what Canvas is used for in sound design for digital media? Reading and submitting assessments, reading through the week-by-week summaries, revising and obtaining content from the week's lecture. So yes, it's where you submit your assessments, it's where you can find all the kind of the briefs I do discuss in class as well. And also kind of where you can find the readings, where you can find any links I drop, any resources I provide. It's all going to be there, of course. What Canvas is not used for? Replacing attendance of lectures. So yes, even though I do post the lecture recording, it's not really good enough to not come to class, like digital or otherwise. Like, as long as you're present as much as you can be, and as much as you're comfortable to be, but you need to be allocating that time every week to coming to the class. It's a dedication that we expect at digital media, and I think I try my best to make all the lectures important and interesting and fun. So you'd really be missing out on a lot if you didn't come in real time as much as possible, as I said, because it's a big part of how I consider how this class works. I mean, even if you're online, just kind of coming, watching the lecture live, you can ask questions to me in real time, essentially, if you have any. And then if we can have a chat, because on Teams there are one-on-one chats that we have afterwards, and you can actually ask me any questions that you have about technical things. How do I record this? My recorder's not working properly. The digital audio interface I'm working with isn't going great. The program's messing up. Like, these are really important questions that really I can only answer in real time, working with you, and that's what a big chunk of the class time is for later in semester, is for you doing your work and coming to me with questions and problems, and actually always showing me your work in progress and seeing where you're at. So worth kind of just a mention there. Now, I actually want to show you some stuff in Canvas, just because I think it's useful for you guys to know what's kind of the haps. Hold on, where is that? Oh, that's right. There it is. Great. So I just want to show you Canvas and how I'm using it, so you can understand in real terms how I'm using it. So obviously, announcements really key. Syllabus, that's where you see that calendar I showed. Modules, which I'll go through in a second, that's a biggie. Discussions. So this is an opportunity to kind of like, if you want to ask a question to the class, I might post a thing here, a thing or two here over the semester. Assignments. Now you'll see I look like an insane person here who has put a million assessments into the one course. Don't worry, they're actually 4. If you go to show by type, you'll see there's actually just 4 assessments. But what's included in each assessment is, and I have a link actually, I'll show you in a second in the modules, that will kind of like, it's a long video about how these work, but really basic overview. In-class task, so for next week, this one here is there. Then the assessment part A, which actually is how you submit the media, so the audio recording or the video. And the part B is the written. So that's actually the one assessment. It just looks like 2 because of the way Canvas works. And then, so they're all like that. They just have an in-class kind of assessment, in-class portion, and then the part A, part B, and then you'll see this one. The sonic analysis, that's the in-class thing. The peer-to-peer discussion, that's the in-class task. And then the part A, part B. So it's not a million assessments. It just looks like that when you first look at it. It's actually kind of just 4 assessments over a semester, broken up into these little bits. That makes it much easier to, one, obviously grade for you guys because everything's really clear. But also, hopefully, when it comes to submission, it makes things really dead simple for you. Because there's been issues in the past with submission just because it can be kind of complicated. This is the simplest, most straightforward way I've worked out to do it. All right, and then obviously this is where you see grades. This is all just stuff that you'll understand from other stuff. But I want to go back to modules. So there's the week-by-week summaries. And, we're starting this assessment today, so that'll be in that week. But here's where you get your readings, because there are readings in this course. I've tried to keep them short and sweet when I can. So, yeah, they're sorted into week by week where they kind of go. That's where they're located when you need to find them. But what I really want to show you now, welcome and orientation. So this is where that submission of assessments thing is. Here's where kind of a reading, a kind of summary of the course requirements are. So yeah, there's that in-class task you can read through yourself. Here's the instructional videos that I discussed. They're really worth a watch because it just clarifies everything. Watch it on double speed. They're pretty dry, but it just takes you through how assessments work. For example, an important thing to note for this semester is that you're writing, I'm giving you the Word document templates to work within. And that's so I'm not grading on formatting. It's just a much more equitable way to teach and to submit assessments. So make sure you're doing that. Make sure you watch this for the explanation of that. And yeah, what the software you need, which I'll go into a moment. But if you need to revise and you don't want to watch a whole lecture, there's all that there as well. Back to modules. This is where I've put a lot of work into. So in week 3, you need to download an audio program. This is where you find a link to that. Office 365, it's really important that you're using that in the semester. That's where that is. And then here's some great little kind of extra resources that I'll talk about another semester, later in the semester. And then some useful websites where you can find some really interesting readings. And also LinkedIn Learning has a really great, which is paid for by RMIT, has a really great in-depth technical course if you want to take your Reaper knowledge a bit further. that, because I teach a really good solid overview so you know how to navigate and how to use it. But if you want to know every function, how every plugin works, LinkedIn might be your place if you want to take it further. But I show a lot in class as well. And also if you have a question that you want answered, look at LinkedIn Learning, because I think there'll be a lot there for you. There's a global dictionary which is provided by kind of the digital media course, just about kind of some terminology. Now what I've done, I've gone one step further, because for a lot of you, obviously a lot of this terminology about sound will be really new. So here's we get that. I've put together a sound glossary. And this should be really helpful for anyone who's struggling with the language. I've kind of taken down all the words that I think people often struggle with in this course, and I've created a new glossary taken from a couple different sources. One is the Oxford Dictionary. Sorry, a computer screen. The second computer screen is like a mile away, so I'm trying to look at it. And then taken. So some of the definitions I've written myself, and some of them I've kind of edited to kind of give it a sound-specific context, and some of them are taken from filmsound.org, which is like a really fantastic kind of, not referential, but kind of a really great casual kind of an industry-based sound kind of theory resource. So I just really wanted to highlight that. And that's basically, that's all kind of the extra really kind of bits I wanted to show you from Canvas. I'm sure you're all on top of it. It's pretty straightforward, but I just wanted to highlight especially that, because I think, if you are feeling intimidated by the language or kind of feeling a bit lost, that could be really useful. But also, if there's a definition that isn't there that you want to be there, contact me and I'll add it. And I'll tell you right away, of course, as well. I mean, like, it'll be up in a week. No, I'll tell you right away, and then I'll also add it to the sound glossary. All right, that's it for the Canvas talk. Blah blah blah. I told you this is the admin zone. It's deep. It's cavernous. Play chat open window. All right, and we'll get to hear the bell sound again. Yay! All right, requirements: prior knowledge. Nothing. I'm not expecting you to have any knowledge of sound before coming into this. So don't stress. There's nothing you need to know. Equipment. Now let's pay attention here. You need a functioning computer. Now, I expect, given that you're all on streaming and on Teams, that you have one. But beyond that, I also mean one that can kind of like have minor video processing capabilities. Nothing major. I'm not expecting a powerful computer, but like minimum 8 gigabytes. And minimum, it's not going to die if you try to slice a piece of audio or something like that, or import a video to something. Thank you, Angelique. I'm very glad that you're appreciative of the sound glossary. I worked very hard on it, actually, because I think it's really important, actually. All right, so yes, and my second point is a pair of wired headphones. Now, I don't want anyone to buy equipment for this course. I don't want you to feel like you have to purchase anything, because it's not fair. There's a whole things about finances and also access to things. So I'm not expecting you to buy anything beyond, if you don't have one already, a cheap $5 pair of wired headphones, if you don't have anything else. So why am I asking you to do for wired headphones? A lot of people, obviously I've got my stylish wired headphone here, sparkly silver. The reason is that Bluetooth headphones, which I have several pairs of, I really like. Naz, we'll have to have a one-on-one discussion about the iPad Pro. It could be a problem, potentially, because I think you need a computer. But we'll have it. Talk to me after the class. We need to talk about that. Potentially, it might be fine. Potentially, it might be a bit complicated too. So please talk to me. So I'm glad I brought this, put the functioning computer thing in, because we can work a workaround if required. But thank you for saying that. We need to talk about that. Anyway, to get on my point about wired headphones, Bluetooth headphones are great for ingesting music, for listening to music. They're incredibly convenient. You're not tripping over this thing all the time. But they cause massive issues for sound or content in general creation, because there's a latency in it, because of course it's wireless, there's going to be a delay, and also each headphone has its own digital it's called a digital audio converter, so a DAC, a DAC. And that basically is the thing that turns it from a binary signal into sound or vibrations. And often the DACs in Bluetooth headphones are cheaper and smaller because, of course, you have to fit a whole lot of other components in there. And they take up a massive amount of processing power as well on the computer end. It causes all sorts of issues. So please just avoid that. If you don't have a pair of wired headphones, buy yourself a cheapy pair from the supermarket, because it will make your life 20 times easier. And finally, this is another really important point, a sound recording device. So, can we try and be very clear here? I'm not expecting anyone to own anything or buy anything to record with. Absolutely not. But if you're able to come into RMIT on campus, which a lot of you said you would be, which is cool, you can loan a Zoom H4 recorder to record with. So if you're able to do that, I really want you guys to do that. In fact, I would say it's a requirement. However, given the situation, if you can't access the loans department and you don't have your own recording device at all, don't panic. Don't go, you need to buy one. A phone or a computer or an iPad is a perfectly acceptable and good recording device in that situation. So all I would ask is, when you submit your work, tell me that when in your written that you couldn't access a recorder due to the thing. So yeah, I just want to make that really clear. Like, it won't affect your grade, but I need it stated in the work that you couldn't access a recorder, because then I'm not listening to the piece going, geez, I did a really bad job of using that Zoom recorder. No, then I understand, there's a compromise here that had to be done because of the situation or a situation. So I won't allow that to enter my grading process at all. So I hope that's clear. But yes, in general, just, if you can access campus, there's a really fantastic loan department here, which is in building 9, floor 1, room 8, I think. They're really nice. They're really lovely. And they have the Zoom recorder is really fantastic, which we'll talk about next week. I think my camera has officially died. I'm waiting on a plug to come in, so that doesn't happen. But you can still hear me, so that's fine. Sorry about that. It shows me how long my bloody lecture's going. Right, requirements for software. Reaper. So Reaper is a free to download and use audio editing software. We talk about this week 3. Don't feel like you need to go download it right now. In fact, I'd prefer you didn't, because we'll talk about it when it's appropriate. It will prompt you, do you want to buy a license? The trial period is 90 days, I think. But a little secret is that the trial period is essentially indefinite. So for the purposes of this course, there's no reason you need to buy it. It'll just have a little message every time you open it that you can close in 5 seconds. It's a really great way to curb piracy on their part. But if you do want to buy it, the license is $60 after or I think it's more like 90 conversion. After the course, and you're still interested in sound, it's a really good and cheap way to get started. And that's why I teach it. No need to buy it, because you don't get any other features. It just doesn't come up with the pop-up ad. But yeah, it's a really fantastic program. It's free. It's very low. And it works on low-end computers as well. So that should work. And Office 365 and Word. So just have the word processing thing, because that's where I formatted the documents that you write, and it just means things are more straightforward and easier. There's not going to be issues with compatibility. And expectations for behavior. I've got a very expectant pug here. I use a stock image website, Unsplash, to do all the images. And when I typed in expectation, this was the first image. And I went, you know what? This is perfect. I don't know why. I don't even know why it's here, but it's perfect. So submit work on time. It's really key. If you are having issues and you can't submit on time, contact me before 24 hours before due date, so I can put in the proper extensions. And you need some evidence. Unless you have a special consideration, you need some evidence that there has been an issue. And I should be able to give you a little bit of leeway. I'm pretty good about that. Life happens; it's okay. And I have some discretion with that. So talk to me. Basically, if you can't submit work on time, talk to me. Don't panic. Don't go, oh my God, okay, I'm not going to talk to him. I'm just going to not tell him about it. Just, because I will notice, of course, if you haven't submitted something, just talk to me. And I'm more than happy and very eager to help and actually work out a compromise that will work for you. I prefer you to talk to me and submit late than not talk to me and submit late, which means I can't, grade it, or not talk to me and not submit at all, which means you just get a 0, which really sucks. I don't like doing that. And this is the really fun part of the admin zone. Attend lectures, as I said with the Canvas thing, just like attend lectures, please. It's really important. And mutual respect for classmates and for me. So everyone obviously be nice to each other and to me, please. At this point, I think it might be pertinent to mention that I have dyslexia. Angelique, I'll get to you. That's a really good question. I'll talk to you in a second. I have dyslexia and I have a lot of trouble with names. And I'm also an Australian. We have a really terrible education system as far as different languages and different phrasing. So I'll often mispronounce as well. And I just have to own that. I'm sorry. I try really hard with names. But because of my dyslexia, which is literally a problem with a problem with your brain processing sequences, things like names, I can forget names. It doesn't mean that I don't know you or I don't remember you. It's just I sometimes have trouble with that. So please try. I'm trying my best. But please just try and understand that I can have trouble with that. On that subject, actually, in Teams, if you could put a picture, it doesn't have to be a picture of you, just a picture in your kind of like little circle thing, the profile image, that will really help as well, because it means I can put an image to that name as well. If it's just a whole lot of letters, my brain goes, I don't understand this, and just kind of like out the window. So just put an image next to it. It doesn't have to be, as I said, it doesn't have to be of you. It can be of anything. Just, so I kind of have a sense of, oh, it's that color. I know who that is. So, Angelique, and this is stated actually in the course requirements, but I'll state it here. If you have a program you like using, that's an audio-specific program, so no video editing programs here, no Premiere, but something like Angelique has suggested, Ableton Live, I am more than happy for you to use that. The reason I also teach in Reaper is because the things I teach in Reaper are pretty cross-transferable. All the things it's the one that's the most like every other program, and there's specifics and weirdnesses with each of them. But Reaper's the most straightforward. So you can continue using Ableton. But I would also recommend downloading Reaper and trying it, because it's a pretty good program. Especially for video, it can be a lot easier. But I'm more than happy for you to continue using Ableton if that's a program that you're more comfortable with. I hope that answers your question. If not, I'll continue talking, but if you have another question or need clarification on something else, I'll answer it when it pops up. Great. Contact outside of class time. So this is just a really important note. I don't see messages in Teams outside of class time, and it's very easy for me to miss messages in Canvas because all the notifications are bundled up into an end of day summary. So if I'm not on Canvas today, it's really easy for me to miss your message. Please contact me at ben.keen@rmit.edu.au. Because I pretty much will guaranteed I'll get back to you. I know I'll see it because I have notifications on my phone, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. If I'm obviously doing some work on a project, like, in the theater or out, I won't see it, but, when I have an opportunity, I will reply to you and give you the answer you need. So just make sure you're doing that. Guys, we did it. We did it. We got through the admin zone. I get to stop talking about this stuff now. Yes. We no longer have to talk about this. This is really a long trumpet piece, but it's worth it because I'm celebrating. We are out of the admin zone. Now onto a bit more of an interesting discussion. What is this? And this is going to be another one of those things. It's a bit delayed, and I apologize. I'm actually going to ask you guys, what is a sound beyond vibration? What is it that we perceive? So this is an odd question, and I feel like even when I'm asking it, my brain's going a bit weird. What is it we perceive? What do people think? What are the kind of bits that we pay attention to? This is where I'm making all sorts of interesting faces now, but of course you can't see it. I keep forgetting the camera's off now. I think the new battery is arriving this week. I think that should fix it. But yeah, what is it we perceive? What do people think? Great. So tone, pitch. Thanks. Sorry. What? Can you type in your actual name as well? By the way, just in the chat, or your first name, just so I don't have to say I do want. Okay, fantastic. I'm liking all these answers. Thank you, Angelique. Right, tone, pitch. Yes. So tone and pitch are the same thing. They're just different words for it, basically. So yes, how high or low a sound is part of what we perceive. We associate with the moving of something or an object, certainly. And this is something we're going to talk about next week when we talk about Xion. There's a certain aspect to sound that's about identifying what it is and what it's made from and what it's doing. But I'll talk about that next week because we're talking about a lot today. Evelyn. Thank you, Evelyn. Fantastic. Sorry about that. So tone, pitch, yes, fantastic. Angelique, isn't that question subjective? I mean, certainly it's subjective in the way that vision is subjective. People have different capabilities with vision and with hearing, and people need hearing aids, people need glasses, and color. I don't know if what I see as red is actually what everyone sees as red, but it looks red to me. But there's a certain universality that we all understand. We kind of basically hear the same elements. So Evelyn is on the closest trajectory here, and I'll start with what she was talking about, which is frequency, also known as pitch or tone. The speed of a vibration determines how high or how low the sound is. So when I talk like this and very up high, I'm actually tightening my vocal cords. So the way they vibrate is higher. And when I talk like this, I'm actually relaxing them in a weird way. So they make more of a movement. So here's a really great example of visual of a very hippy dippy channel. These are called singing bowls. And because there's water in it, we get to see what that vibration is. So this is actually, what's moving the water is the vibration that's also making that deep sound. And also then making more sound. because they're rubbing this piece of rubber on a stick and causing it to vibrate, it creates that tone, and then you can see the vibration because of the water. So yes, we perceive pitch. We perceive that kind of frequency, high or low. We perceive loudness, the amount of power a vibration is being pushed outward with. Now, headphone warning. There's a whole internet subculture based on making things very loud. And yeah, loudness. I mean, and loudness is a thing we'll really get into later in semester because it actually is a bit weird. But basically, we can hear when it sounds quiet, and we can hear when it sounds louder. We have a sense of that. We feel it whether it's quieter or louder, and we have to strain to hear it. Or we have to step back from it because it's too loud. And finally, we have rhythm. So rhythm we understand as a drum beat, boom, boom. But rhythm really doesn't just apply to music. It's just the way sound is ordered in time. And often it's repeating in some sense. There's a kind of sense of a repetition. But there's a really great example here. So this is a comedy set from John Mulaney that's being accompanied by a percussionist. And why this is really good is because it makes clear how that rhythm in John Mulaney's voice is functioning and how it actually is rhythmic. Even though it's not musical, it's incredibly rhythmic.
Sometimes when people order fries, they act like it's a little adventure. They'll be like, should we get a plate of fries for the table? Should we do it? Should we share some fries? They gotta make sure that everyone's on board with it. It's like, if I get fries, you'll have a couple, right? If I get fries for the table, I know you'll have fries if I get fries. Should we do it? Yeah, let's be bad. Come on, let's do it. All right, we're gonna take a plate of fries. It's like a group of couples agreeing to do ecstasy together.
Right. So yes, even though there's a non-musical set, there's a certain musicality or rhythm to the way it's speaking. And we'll get into rhythm more later in semester, but fundamentally, at a really basic beginning level, those are the three things we perceive most often when we think about sound. All right, guys. So getting into the next part of the lecture, we now understand the elements, basically, of what a sound can be. My next question is, what is the difference between hearing and listening? And this is another question that I'm going to give you guys a moment to... I know this is a strong tonal pivot from showing dumb memes to this piece of music, but... all right. What is the difference between hearing and listening? Can anyone sum that up? Is there a difference? The dabbing emoji is very appropriate for my terrible memes. Thank you. Also worth mentioning, Naz, great answer, waves and echoes. Resonance is certainly something we kind of hear and perceive, and we'll talk about that later in semester, so it's a really interesting answer. And Andrew Lee, certainly the emotions are something that we definitely feel, but it's not necessarily something we perceive, and that's very subjective, actually. Going back to what Angelique said, the emotions are very subjective. So, active versus passive. Now, that's really true. And intention, I think, Naz, certainly. It's about attention. It's about attention more than intention. So when we hear, it's something our ears do 24/7. When we sleep, our ears never turn off. We shut our eyes. We don't look anymore. We turn off that part of our brain. We turn off a lot of our physical senses as well, like feel. We don't feel a lot of things as we sleep. That goes a bit numb. But hearing never switches off. And Subconscious versus subconscious. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Jasmine. That's really great. I associate listening to words. That's very interesting. Yes, because often I think when we most listen is when we're listening to language. These are really great answers, guys. Thank you. I'm really pleased. I'm very, very happy. These are really good answers. All of them are really good answers. Everyone who's responded through this class has had really good answers. I'm very happy. Listening to words. So that's really interesting to me because it's about the information garnered is important if someone's talking and you're listening to that. And yes, subconscious. So hearing is subconscious. It never switches off while we're sleeping. That's why we know when there's a loud bang in the night, you'll wake up because your hearing never switches off. So it's subconscious, whereas listening is conscious. Now, this may seem like a really obvious thing, but it's something we really have to start paying attention to as sound designers. Because in this class, guys, everyone here is a sound designer. For the time of this class and the time you work in this course, you're all sound designers, and you need to start listening to everything and not just hearing things. So yes, it is awareness. Intention, active versus active versus passive. So, off that, I really want to talk about another practitioner who is very interesting and very important, Pauline Oliveros. She's an American composer, kind of mid-century. She also played accordion. She's really central to development of mid-20th electronic music. Like from the 60s onwards, she was really kind of up there working on some really interesting projects. And she created a lot of like culturally important experimental compositions. In addition to that, or actually alongside, because as she wrote these compositions, she also wrote some very important theories on creation and observation of sound. You're actually currently listening to this beautiful piece that she did with a band called Deep Listening, that is entirely improvised. And you see the cover of this album. This is actually an image of where they recorded it, which was an underground cistern. Now, nothing post-production, after the recording has been done to these recordings, the reverberation, the echoes, the waves and echoes, as Naz would put it, these were all from the space. Now, what is so kind of terrifying about this piece for me, in a sense, just knowing that the only way you could access it, because it's deep underground, it's a space that used to be filled up with water. The only way they could access it, they had permission, because it was decommissioned, was to go down a narrow tunnel that they could barely fit through into this massive space. So the work was completely improvised, and it's an incredible space where everything is resonating all the time. And she developed, through the making of this work, this seminal album, a kind of technique or kind of a methodology of performance called deep listening. The practice of deep listening as it is developed explores the difference between hearing and listening. It's almost like it's related to what I was talking about. That's interesting. Ben, you're so clever. No, you're not. The ear hears. So that's a physical thing. The brain listens. And this is the kind of third aspect, which I think is very interesting. The body senses vibrations. So if you've ever sung, if you've ever performed anything, or even if you've kind of publicly spoken, the idea of the vibrations that your body produces, or even going to a concert, actually, it's a really great example, and feeling the sound. That's a very visceral and very exciting thing. So deep listening is a practice of engaging with all three ways of sensing sound in a really conscious way, not just kind of sitting there and going, oh, this feels interesting, actually really thinking about those three parts that make up sound. This is her from a TEDx talk. It's probably one of the best TEDx talks out there because she actually knows what she's talking about. It's only 10 minutes long. I recommend. When the slides are posted, follow the YouTube link. It's a really fantastic talk. But she basically is stating that these are the kind of elements that form deep listening. Now, sonic awareness models for listening. Ollie Veras often discussed different ways we notice or passively ignored sound. Sonic awareness applies her ideas to psychological models of human processing. Now, I know that's a mouthful, but I'll talk about that in a second. So, we're now at to the point of the lecture where we've still got an hour class cut. I'm going to try and make sure we still have a bit of time for discussion afterwards, but I'm happy to hang out after class as well if people need. But I want us now to get up on Canvas and actually have a read of this text. We can read through it together. I'm happy to... that might be complicated because of the delay. But I think it's really worth a read. I'll get it up now, actually. And there's some questions on text that are really important. What information processing does Oliveras engage with and why? What does this image that I'm showing here represent? And what kind of sound is promoted with this theory? So I'll get the reading up for myself. Modules. Readings. So this is by a reading by Heidi von... where have you gone reading? Heidi von Gooden. And so anything that's redlined, you're not paying attention to. So that's just like the top and the tail of this, where she starts talking about a different idea. Look, I'm just going to start reading through it with you guys because week one, it's a lot. I'm talking through right now, so I think it's fair enough. I'll just read this. It's not that long. I'll read through it for you guys with you. So read along with me when you have the moment. I'll have my little cursor where I am. So if you're taking a bit longer to get it up, you can just catch up. So sonic awareness is a perceptual theory about how we can hear and make sounds. It's based upon two models of human information processing, attention and awareness. So the idea of paying attention and being aware, which are separate ideas actually. As Oliveras explains, awareness is global, non-linear, and registers sensory, imagined, and remembered information. So awareness is global, non-linear, registers sensory, imagined, and remembered information. So really important we kind of get that. So awareness, you can remember an image and you can be aware of it. Whereas attention is focal, occupied, and singular and sequential and linear material, meaning you have to pay attention to me talking right now. But you can remember that fantastic remix I did of with Nicki Minaj and Lil Wayne earlier, right? So that's your awareness of that piece of music, but now you're having to pay attention to me talking. So that's the difference. Oliveras uses the architectural symbol of a circle, archetypal, architectural. Why am I doing this? I'm dyslexic. You're going to have a horrible time. That's right. I'm going to keep going. Of a circle with a centered dot as a model of this relationship, with the circle representing awareness, the dot representing attention. So awareness is the circle, dot is attention. The symbol is so important to her theory that often the structural and visual basis for many of her more recent pieces as a visual base. So basically what they're stating here is that she uses this in a lot of her creative work. Artistically, Oliveras' sonic awareness is a synthesis of the psychology and subconscious of sociology. Oh, God. Need some water. The martial arts, sociology, and the feminist movement. So this is mid-70s when she's doing this. Second wave feminism, I think. Many other psychologists who are especially interested in the levels of consciousness and function of the two hemispheres of the brain. A student of karate herself, this woman was such a badass. She was awarded black belt in 1980. Oliveras has practiced the attention and awareness theories associated with that discipline. Since her music frequency erases the divisions between performers and audience, or creators and performers, which is also why I really like this thought. Her work often reflects the feminist position of equality. So this idea that we're all equal, even creatives and listeners or engaged people, consumers of this content, on an equal platform here. There's no hierarchy, which is really important to think about as well. The theory of sonic awareness promotes sound that is natural, since it's often vocal, sound that is free. Whoops, sorry. I've been not paying attention there. I am just here. Free from complicated notational systems, and sound that is powerful in its effects in a compositional context, where the Western aesthetic principles of psychological distance and dichotomy between art and nature trespassed. So, let me get that up. Trespassed. Right. So what she's basically saying here is that what Oliveros is doing is really pulling apart that sense that the natural world of sound, so like, someone speaking, or a bird in the forest, or the sound of the leaves in the trees, is fundamentally less valuable than Bach's symphonies, because they can be equally valuable and equally as interesting and equally as beautiful. It's about breaking down that idea. Instead, for Oliveros, ritualism, healing, and humanism become the goal of sonic awareness and the beauty of the byproduct. So she's saying, if you're paying attention, all of these things are equally beautiful. Musically, so it's like here now. Musically, the theory generates complex sound masses possessing strong tonal center, normally conflicting terms, but an adequate description of the functions of attention with tonal and awareness, which registers surrounding material, the mass. Timbre, attack, duration, intensity. These are all things that we're going to talk about later in the semester. And sometimes pitch are incredibly flexible and often cover a wide gamut of possibilities. Time and space are the freest of all dimensions and flaunt musical tradition, formal body language, and acceptable concert scheduling. So basically saying this Western, supremely European tradition perhaps is very limiting. Long segments of time and environmental settings replace the Western concept of where and when music should be performed. Sonic awareness could function as a complementary dimension to music theory. The physicist Niels Bohr introduced the principle of complementary to the The physicist Niels Bohr introduced the principle of complementary to the scientific world, which discovered that different modes of observation can produce differing but not contradicting information about natural phenomena. Oh my god, that sentence. Welcome to university, guys. Basically what this is saying is that saying that these things can work together, the natural and the value we get out of a natural piece of sound in the forest and a highly constructed piece of music are actually kind of fundamentally connected. They're both natural phenomena in a sense. Bohr's discovery of electrons have behave as waves as well as the previously considered particles. Latest formations of the principle of complementary. So basically saying that they're all waves. They all work together in these really fundamental ways and can be just as engaging and important. In no way do I tend to represent myself as a thoroughly understanding of Bohr's principle of complementarity. But I do want to mention the fact that the discoveries in one area thought are frequently reflected in other disciplines. For instance, I find it curious that Arnold Schoenberg, who was a contemporary of Bohr, was describing the intuitive struggle to musically realize and articulate what Schoenberg termed the supreme law of comprehensibility. In the 1950s, when Bohr and others were working with complementary, Carl Jung was presenting the concept of synchronicity, which is described as another way of knowing, and John Cage was experimenting with music theory of chance and indeterminacy in music. So these are all really important, male theorists. Then, in the early 1970s, Oliveros, an avant-garde composer sensitive to the tenor of the times, began to work in the era of sonic awareness. Together with an ensemble of 10 women, she explored the fourfold procedure of hearing sound. One could actively make sound or imagine it, listen to present sound, or remember past sound. Oliveros discovered that the relationship between these procedures form a cross, another archetypal symbol, and this model became the foundation of sonic meditations. Now, my God, that was a mouthful to talk through, but we land on this: actively make sound, remember past sound, actually imagine sound, listen to present sound. So all these processes, if I ask you to remember the sometimes behave so strangely and what that sounds like, you can remember that now. And if I ask you to imagine the sound of a lion roaring, you can imagine that. Psychologically, you have awareness of these things and can recreate them in your head. And so what this is saying here is that Pauline Oliveros, her work often seeks to highlight the connections between these things and how they are connected. Now, that was a lot. We're now going to actually engage with the work of hers. But I'll play this bit of music just a little bit longer and give you a moment to ask any questions that you may have about this. Given I've read it out, I won't pose these questions, but there's a lot in that article and a lot of things that, perhaps are beyond what we're going to cover. Certainly the ideas of complementarity. I still can't pronounce that, my God. It's probably something that we don't need to worry about too much. So don't feel intimidated. But basically what this writer, Heidi von Gonden, is trying to put forward is that there were a whole lot of male theorists, or it doesn't matter the gender, but there were a whole lot of theorists at the time talking through these important ideas, and then Oliveros in the 70s comes in and offers this kind of alternate perspective, which was kind of very key in unlocking a whole lot of different and more culturally open forms of sonic expression. So, any questions? Otherwise, just type all G, and we'll move forward to the next piece, which will just be me reading out to you a poem of hers. And then we're getting into the next part, which is about podcasts, and then we'll talk about the first assignment. Cool, all G, perfect. Cool. I will move forward in a moment then. So yes, Angelique, we're hearing a recording from the deep listening piece that she did. So this is what the result of that deep listening album, where they went into that underground kind of water silo was. So, earpiece. Sorry. Earpiece, Pauline Oliveros. Are you listening now? Are you listening to what you are now hearing? Are you hearing while you listen? Are you listening while you're hearing? Do you remember the last sound you heard before this question? What will you hear in the near future? Can you hear now and also listen to your memory of an old sound? What causes you to listen? Do you hear yourself in your daily life? Do you have healthy ears? If you could hear any sound you want, what would it be? Are you listening to sounds now, or are you just hearing them? What sound is most meaningful to you? My dog has started freaking out because I've been in my studio too long. Certainly the sound I'm thinking about most now. It's a beautiful piece, this one. It's a beautiful sound piece. What is a piece of music or a piece of sound other than something to make you listen? And I believe this piece makes you listen. I would call it a sound piece. I don't need you to comment at all on anything. It's just something I want you to think about. Hello. Just something I want you to think about. Right. Podcasting. Modern sonic storytelling. I'm going to let my dog into the studio because it's going to keep whining, but also do comment if you can hear him because he's driving me crazy, but I don't know if he's reading in the microphone or not. Hello. Oh, you bum. You missed me? Come on. Come here. Say hello, Red. It'd be cool if my camera was working. You can see my dog. But he's a 7-month-old. Oh, no, 9-month-old. Yeah. Say hello. That's him tapping the microphone, kind of. Oh, my God. Okay, you idiot. All right, cool. So, podcasting. What is a podcast? What is your favorite of yours and why? Given we're running low on time because of the technical issue at the beginning, I'll let you think about that question for yourself. But the spoken word, and this is why it was really interesting. I'm glad that you like the dog. Hello. Yes, I know. Spoken word, oral history. Before any written recordings, humanity passed down knowledge through story and song. In fact, music and rhythm and poems and words are all really closely connected. They're all fundamental to each other. It's how we developed language. We developed rhythm first, and then the repeated rhythm meant something. Even though today we have many different ways to communicate and record ideas, spoken word and public speaking remained a really essential part of how we share ideas. Like it's, I think a really great example is the fact that we had Amanda Gorman, I should say, the USA's first poet laureate, speak at Biden's inauguration and say a poem. It's a really key time in America's political history. And these words, these speeches are incredibly important. While I'm trying to say all this, my dog is currently chewing my hand to bits, but I'm doing my best. And that idea of spoken word, live spoken word, listening to an orator being a speaker, it's still really powerful. But of course, in the 20th century, we had the advent of radio, and that really sped up. So now you get an idea, rather than having to go through several people through through written word, you can now broadcast, which means to, like casting a seed broadly. You could broadcast your voice over hundreds and thousands of miles. One voice. In the consolidation of that, which means, the shrinking down of, many to one, really changed the way that ideas were shared. But of course, radio has now kind of had its time. It's now losing relevancy. I mean, I don't think I've ever listened to the radio in the last 5 years for more than 5 minutes. But and the idea of talk radio is no longer a thing. And largely, of course, streaming services have taken over that kind of cultural role. And it means that many of the barriers to get yourself broadcasting online have changed. Now, I'm not going to say they're gone because, yes, while anyone can get a recorder and put a podcast up, well, who's going to make people listen to it? Well, it's really up to the streaming services and the advertisers and the agency that wants to pick you up and the particular station or kind of production company that wants to promote your work. There's still a number of barriers, but they've really changed. But the idea of the spoken word, this idea of storytelling, I think is still just as powerful. And in fact, I think more powerful now than it's ever been because of the new kind of digital way we can share voice. I want to talk about podcasts because I think often people think podcasts are just a conversation or an interview. But it's more of a format than it is a genre. It's more like a CD or a film than it is, talkback radio or an interview or news or, it really is something that lots of different things can take place on. Broadcast can be news. It could be interviews. It can be a historical documentary, either kind of dry and just an accounting or incredibly evocative, and highly constructed. It can be an editorial discussion, an improvisational or scripted comedy, a casual conversation, more like those talkback radios of the day, or a constructed narrative, completely fictional, with a completely, made up kind of soundscape to accompany it with music, just like a film. It's essentially a radio play is what you call it, even though the term radio play is kind of outdated. So I'm gonna play you just some trailers or introductions to some of my favorites, which are my favorites for a lot of different reasons. And there's some violent imagery in it, just as a warning, but I think they're really interesting, and I'll go into why as well.
Hi, welcome to Subway. What can I get you?
Hi, I would like...
Excuse me, sorry.
I'm sorry.
I was first.
Yeah, sorry, this gentleman was first.
No, because I'm just... sorry, no.
Captain Phillip.
Now, you...
Don't think I don't know who you are. I'll go on social media.
I know who you are, Sir Jeffrey Cooks, and you...
What does it cook?
Shut up! This is what you have to understand. Oi, I didn't cut in front of you. You've already ordered your sandwich. I'm just getting some fit chips. And I don't need to get in the line for
fit chips in the
Excuse me.
those days.
Pardon? Yeah, of course.
I'll get to both of you.
No, fit chips have been around for a long time.
No, they haven't. They weren't around.
We just need to find out from FMs. When were fat chips invented at Subway? Was it before the first fleet?
1612.
Right. So, this is the most casual type of one. It's just 3 fellas getting into a recording booth and talking to each other and seeing what happens. There's no attempt at kind of structure. There's no kind of, quotation marks, editing done to the conversation to make it kind of clearer. It just is what it is. It's chaotic. And you may find it completely unfunny. I find it funny. But there's very little construction. So that's one kind of podcast. And often I think that's what people kind of can see a podcast as, is just this kind of you're recording yourself and putting it online. But here's a wonderful bit of reporting. So this is the Women's War International Conflict Reporting. So this is documentary. So taking you moment to moment through his journey through navigating the peaceful but precarious area in the Middle East, which is Rojava, which is kind of currently in the middle of Syria, very kind of precarious position where they fought for, one of the biggest things being a tremendous increase in women's rights. And it has constructed with narration, field recording, interviews, and overdub translation. So very constructed in its manner.
I'm Robert Evans. I'm a journalist, and I cover the international fascist movement. And in 2019, July of that year, I decided to do something a little bit different. Instead of covering horror, I wanted to go look for hope. And I found it in a place you might find kind of unlikely, northeastern Syria. The region I visited is known as Rojava, and when the Western media covers it, they mostly just refer to these people as the Kurds. Since 2013, a loose alliance of revolutionaries over there have been fighting to not just drive back ISIS, but to establish something of a utopia, an egalitarian, feminist, eco-conscious community in a place that previously had known mostly war and terror. In the Women's War, I'll take you to this place, and I'll introduce you to the revolutionaries fighting to build it.
So, culturally, obviously interesting, but, very well constructed and kind of guerrilla style as well. The audio recordings of the interviews are never particularly high fidelity because it's about getting the recording more than getting a good recording. It's not so much about how it sounds at the time, but that what is being said is very important. Then S-Town. So if you've ever kind of engaged with the podcast culture at all, you've known about kind of the idea of detective work, investigative stuff, and the biggest one would be Serial, which kind of like is about like 20 episodes or something about investigation of a man in prison for a murder. And, there's a whole lot of armchair detective work happening, like, oh, well, I don't think that happened because, blah, blah, blah. But, it's a really massive part of the podcast subculture because it's very, there's a satisfaction to murder mysteries and, oh, it's real, even more interesting. S-Town does something a bit more interesting, I think, where it follows this a kind of southern clock restorer who is convinced that something really suspicious is happening in the town. Whether something is suspicious or not is unknown and not clarified in the first bits. And I'm really careful here because I don't want to spoil this if you do want to listen to it because it's a really beautiful podcast. But it's highly constructed with music, themes, interviews, and has a very intentional narrative structure that is then serialized. So this, goes from being, and you'll hear it in a moment, from being like a documentary to almost like, a narrative, more narrative than something you would see traditionally with a documentary or a kind of like, news report.
When an antique clock breaks, a clock that's been telling time for 200 or 300 years, fixing it can be a real puzzle. An old clock like that was handmade by someone. It might tick away the time with a pendulum, with a spring, with a pulley system. It might have bells that are supposed to strike the hour, or a bird that's meant to pop out and cuckoo at you. There can be hundreds of tiny individual pieces, each of which needs to interact with the others precisely. To make the job even trickier, you often can't tell what's been done to a clock over hundreds of years. Maybe there's damage that was never fixed, or fixed badly. Sometimes entire portions of the original clockwork are missing, but you can't know for sure because there are rarely diagrams of what the clock's supposed to look like. A clock that old doesn't come with a manual. So instead, the few people left in the world who know how to do this kind of thing rely on what are often called witness marks to guide their way. A witness mark could be a small dent, a hole that once held a screw. These are actual impressions and outlines and discolorations left inside the clock of pieces that might have once been there. They're clues to what was in the clockmaker's mind when he first created the thing. I'm told fixing an old clock can be maddening. You're constantly wondering if you've just spent hours going down a path that will likely take you nowhere, and all you've got are these vague witness marks, which might not even mean what you think they mean. So at every moment along the way, you have to decide if you're wasting your time or not. Anyway, I only learned about all this because years ago, an antique clock restorer contacted me and asked me to help him solve a murder.
Something's happened. Something has absolutely happened in this town. There's just too much little crap for something not to have happened. And I'm about had enough of shit town and the things that goes on.
From Serial and This American Life, I'm Brian Reed. S-Town, coming March 28th.
So you're beginning to figure it out now, aren't you?
Why I played that whole I think it's a beautiful bit of writing about Clockwork, but it has theme music. It's like a film, it's so constructed. This is legitimately like theme music written for this series. And that's really interesting to me. And yeah, then you bring in the phone recordings of the subject of this podcast. Really, if you're looking for a very good, interesting listen, there's some moral things about the production of it, which I think are worth questioning, which is also something I can't talk about because if you do want to listen to it, I don't want to spoil it. But it's a very interesting piece of podcast work, and probably the best thing that this company, Serial, has produced, I think. More interesting than the murder mystery stuff. Dolly Parton's America. So again, this is a historical and cultural discussion, really in-depth, very deep research-based. It's analysis of her music, lyrics, and, has interviews with her as well. Very much constructed historical discussion.
America from...
Those who were
let's go back. This one, there we go.
America from a Dolly's Eye View is this quivering mass of irreconcilable contradictions.
I'm going to be both. I'm going to be adored by church ladies and the gays.
Yeah, the sexuality, the spirituality, the sensuality. That's exactly who I am.
She's just a beautiful fountain of goodness.
It's me.
100% Dolly is an extractive capitalist.
I always say I give God the credit, I just want the cash.
In terms of cultural power, I think she's like second to Walt Disney.
This is Jed Abumrad from Radiolab and More Perfect. For the last 2 years, I've been following Dolly Parton around the world. Trying to figure out who she is.
You'd be surprised to know who I am.
That's why we're here. We're trying to find out.
I know, but you're never going to find everything out. I'm a mystery to myself.
I'm trying to answer the seemingly simple question, what is Dolly Parton's America?
So yeah, another really highly constructed thing, using interviews, a very interesting cultural analysis. Part of the reason I'm showing all these ones is to kind of demonstrate the podcast really can be kind of anything. And again, like, the tone is completely different, of course. Very upbeat. There's a whole lot of really interesting remixes of her music throughout the kind of run of the podcast. A lot of different versions, some covers as well. It's a very interesting sonic exploration of Dolly Parton's work. And finally, History Lab, which is an Australian production. This one has some kind of graphic description here, but talking about the Anzacs and the idea of remembrance. And again, listen to kind of like how it's constructed, how they're using interviews, and how things are poised. This is just the introduction more than the trailer.
Those who were mutilated by the war had lost legs and arms and eyes and noses and faces.
In the years following World War I, it was normal to see a man like this.
Face blown apart and had lost often both arms.
He would be crossing the road or shopping with his family or at the pub with his mates.
Blind and deaf.
And seeing an isolated reminder of the war, well, that was one thing. But seeing a group of these men en masse?
Mutilated men shuffling along, thousands of them.
That's another story. This is History Lab and I'm Tamsin Peach. Broken bodies and lives lost. We still hear about these things on the news. But the scale of devastation in World War I, that's really hard to imagine.
Right, so again, tonally very different, discussing a very different issue, living history, but kind of only just the interviews are done in a studio. His voice is much more present. The positioning of him within that is very different. He's the first one to speak. These things all kind of matter about how you're framing the work. Finally, I've got a really weird one. I don't know if anyone's encountered this one before. It's pretty popular, but Small Town Dicks. It's Dicks meaning detective from the police. Is your true crime kind of podcast, murder investigation. It's pretty grim and pretty dirty, but you'll notice there's a picture of Lisa Simpson here. Now, this show is hosted by Yardley Smith, the voice actor for Lisa Simpson. And I am fascinated by the show because I cannot disassociate the cartoon character with this voice, even when she's describing violent imagery. So, again, violent imagery.
Lynn got a text on her phone from a male friend while she slept. A text she would never see because her ex-boyfriend, Alan, would see it first, explode with rage, and murder her with a baseball bat. This is the audio of Alan's suspect interview that we excerpted for Season 1, Episode 1, Don't Go. The interview is almost 2 hours in its entirety. For the first hour and change, Alan is simply sitting in the interview room with a camera on him, wearing jail overalls and sandals. He has paper bags over his hands to preserve any biological evidence of the murder.
I can't get over it. It's weird. It's so weird. I don't get it. What a pivot. What a pivot from doing a 9-year-old on The Simpsons to discussing these kind of things. Very, very interesting. And I often listen to it just because it's so weird. It's so ingrained in my head, that voice, as Lisa Simpson. And yet here she is engaging in discussions about these kind of subjects, which is kind of weird. But it's actually very well produced. And again, it's more but this one's interesting because it's more conversational in nature. They get the detective in who worked on the case and just basically discuss it with them. But there's still a tremendous amount of editing because these aren't public speakers. These are working people. So often there's a lot of construction that we're not seeing in the editing. So that's kind of podcast version of Celebrities Where Are They Now? Completely, that's what it is. It's so weird. Now I'm going to talk about, this is the final section for today. I know I'm so sorry that it's taken up so much of the lesson. I did want to have more one-on-one chat after you guys, but I will hang out for as long as is needed if you're able to. Micro podcasting. So, write, record, and edit a short podcast utilizing 2 added sounds to enhance the listening experience and complete a written reflection. So what you need to submit into Canvas is an exported WAV, which is basically a full resolution version of an MP3, that kind of thing. And I'll talk about that in week 3, about how to do that, of your finished podcast, and a docx, using the template provided, as I discussed, in your written, which includes screenshots of your working file. So it's really essential in this course that you're showing your work. So a really good, because often you're trying to deceive me into thinking that something's actually happening. The best example I can tell you is this actually did happen 2018. I was teaching and a student submitted a version of this assessment. It used to be you do an interview with yourself, but I think this version is more interesting, where she was talking about doing the assessment but being really frustrated and just driving in the car, doing up her seatbelt belt and driving off. And my God, it sounded like she wasn't trying and like she was recording on her phone and that it wasn't constructed, and she just did it in a minute and then submitted that. And so off the back of that, because she didn't have screenshots in the initial submission, I was like, well, you didn't try. You just did it in the car. And I kind of said that in my assessment note. She's like, whoa. Here's my screenshots. And the whole thing was a fabrication. She actually recorded her voice at her desk, wrote the script out, and got all the sounds together for it. But I was so convinced by her work that I thought she was being lazy. And so that's why screenshots are so essential, because if you're kind of doing this kind of work, I need to see what's happening and how constructed it actually is, because I can be tricked, because that's the beautiful thing about sound. It doesn't matter how long you've been working, there are still things that can trick you. So for the assessment, you'll have to write and record a podcast that runs a minimum of 60 seconds and a maximum of 90 seconds long. So not long. It's why it's called a micro podcast. Basically just state an idea. And it can be whatever these things are discussed. If you want to do an improvisational comedy thing, like, well, more power to you. But you will have to dictate it afterward, like write it out afterwards into your script. If you want to improvise it, might be hard though. So you write a short script on a subject that interests you. 60 seconds of talking is 150 words. And it can be about anything you want. It can be fictional, non-fictional, story or monologue, detailing some facts around your subject. While writing, now here we go. You should be considering what sounds you will be adding to enhance the project. So don't just kind of go record whatever it is and go, oh, shoot, I need to put sounds in. I'll just do this. No, you need to, from the kind of get-go, say, well, I discuss a cat meowing, or I discuss a computer, an explosion. I'll put that in there, like, or, you know, whatever it is. But it needs to feel considered and like part of it, not just after the fact. So record your script using your own or a friend's voice. I'm happy for you to use another performer if you'd like. I'm also happy actually for you to record in any language, as long as the script you submit is in English. So it's translated. So I'll make that clear as well. If you prefer to record in your own language, that's fine. And what you'll aim with this recording is to implement the things I show in class, and that will be next week. I talk about microphone usage. Aiming for clarity, ease of understanding. And also those added in sounds, as much as possible, find your own sounds you can record. You know, a tree, something from the kitchen, something from the bedroom, something from the bathroom, whatever. Like, or if it's something really fantastical, like an elephant trumpeting or something like that, even though you could probably try doing that yourself, you know, or a massive explosion. I'm happy for you to kind of like find library sounds to do that. And there's actually access to sound libraries on Canvas in the modules. Sorry, the dog is chewing something very suspicious. So yeah, you should aim to record the sound if possible. So you'll then process your recorded vocal performance in the DAW software Reaper. We talked about that. Making any edits, so that's cutting apart and putting the sound together. What have you got? He's just got a rock. Enhance the kind of separate and distinct sounds that will enhance the storytelling, information delivery. It can be a piece of music if you like, but I would ask you not just to put it underneath the whole thing. Bring it in, put it out at a certain point. Like, show me that you've made a choice where to put it. This sound can be something that communicates a location, object, emotion in your finished project. It can be musical, or it can be a sound that is more natural. It can be kind of, you know, the sound of the car, sound of, you know, a rock being tossed by your puppy. Once you have this completed this portion of the assessment, you'll then complete the written reflection using the provided template. So it's a minimum of 200 words, so just aim for 200 words. A maximum of 300 words if you're one of those more talky people. Not inclusive of the script that you've created for the recording. So you just need to outline your thought process between your written, so why you wait for the written you did, and how your added sounds enhance the experience. So justifying why those sounds worked, and your technical process of recording and editing your sound, demonstrating you understand the concepts. So it's worth 18%. It's the smallest, other than the small written from week 11. You must demonstrate technical understanding of the recording equipment, 20%. Technical understanding of the recording process, 20%. Technical understanding of the editing process and workflow, 20%. So this and this, 2 and 3, we'll talk, actually 1, 2, and 3, we'll talk about in the next 2 weeks. So don't worry about that. The addition of 2 added sounds to enhance the podcast, and the ability to describe and reflect on both the conceptual and technical process of your written, 20, 20, 20, 20, 20. So it's all kind of equally weighted in this first assessment. Any questions about that? If not, play all G. because I know this has been a real information dump of a lecture. And the first one always is, I'm afraid. But I promise you there'll be more interaction, and we'll kind of be breaking it up through semester a bit more as well. Brilliant. Cool. So for next week, I want you so don't worry about recording now. Don't even think about that. I want you to think about that next week. What I want you to do now over the next week is two things. I want you to think about your script. So write it, a draft. Thinking about the sounds you're going to add in. And look for an object in your home that produces an interesting sound. Now, this can be anything. I mean, look, I was doing it earlier today. My squeaky thermos that I had my coffee in it. If there's something that, makes an interesting sound or a number of interesting sounds, I want you to bring it in tomorrow or, bring it next week. Sorry, I keep saying tomorrow. Next week, ready to talk about it. Have a listen to it. Think of words that describe it. So if we look at the assessment page up on Canvas, where are you? There we go. So we'll just read through this right now. Attend a class having found and brought you an object that creates an interesting or a number of interesting sounds. So it will not be a digital device that makes sounds. So don't bring in your phone and goes, I can make anything. No, you need to be able to create sound essentially acoustically, which means with it. So it's actually resonating in itself. It's not just playing a file. During class, you'll demonstrate and talk through your interest, why it interests you and why it might be useful for a sound designer. Again, this is an in-class task that you're expected to complete, and then will be marked whether you completed it or not, but it's not graded. So bring in that. In addition, and in addition to your into your kind of a somewhat completed draft or close to completion draft of your written script, or if it's improvisational, talking about what you will do. Because even improvisations have structure. I hope that's all clear. But congratulations. I'm going to applaud you. Your ears are officially switched on. Let the fanfare play. Let it play. Thank you. Yes, good work. Your ears are on now. Congratulations. All of you. But this goes on, doesn't it? Okay. Yep. Cool. Great. Come on. Yep. We get it. Congratulations. Yes. Yeah, I'm wasting time here. I'm sorry. All right. Okay. Shut it. Okay. Cool. Right. I'm now going to be available for the next half hour to have text chats or audio calls. Obviously, my camera's dead, but if you want to video chat with me, that's fine. I just won't be able to have my camera on. I promise by next week that won't be an issue. I'll have my camera working all the time. But yeah, please chat to me. If you have any questions you want to address quite privately, now's the time. Alternatively, of course, I am available via email. So you can contact me there. But I'm going to be here until 7 o'clock. Sitting at the computer. Shoot me a message. Ask me a question. I know I've got at least one person I need to chat to. Also, Naz, please chat to me. Talk to me about your computer situation. Because there may be workarounds. I think it's just going to be different. But I think it's just worth us having a chat. So thank you so much again. I mean, that fanfare was fantastic. I think that's a thank you enough. I know this first lecture is difficult, especially not in person, because it becomes less conversational. It's much more me just yelling at you guys for an hour, or 2 hours, and just throwing sounds at you. But thank you for your attention. I really do appreciate it. Next week, when you come in person, for those who can, I'm really looking forward to seeing you all. For those who can't and are attending online, I'm really looking forward to chatting to you online. Yes, I will let you know what's happening on campus next week when I know. I am under the impression, and I have been told, that next week is face-to-face open. That is what I have been told. I will say to you all to make that assumption too, unless I tell you otherwise. I'm really keen to get into the space with you guys, especially for next week, given we're bringing in objects. I think that will be a lot more interesting, at least if a portion of the class is actually attending in person. So I will say that much. But I will confirm at the start of the week what is happening, because I'll send out a weekly newsletter basically stating what you need to bring in and what's happening. So I'll do that for you guys as well. All right. Well, I'm going to end this stream, but I'm going to give it a minute to make sure I don't miss any else's questions given the delay. Again, thank you. Talk to me on Teams. Shoot me a message if you want to chat. If you have any concerns, please, or there was something that you want me to address or change, about any language I was using or anything, just let me know. I'm always happy to chat. I'm always open. My door's always open in those ways. Cool. Thank you. Fingers crossed, indeed. Thanks so much for your time, guys. I know this this first lecture would be great if we could have done it in person, at least partially. But especially without my dog in the background whining because he wants pats and to bite me. But I hope you had fun. I had fun delivering this lecture because I have a terrible sense of humor. So it's what I like to do. Enjoy your evening, guys, if you are heading off. Otherwise, I'm here to talk for the next half hour. I'm now going to shut down the stream because I keep just saying this kind of thing for an hour. People who have messaged now saying you're all good. Goodbye.